In the brutal British colony of Jamaica in the 1820s, a quiet, observant slave named Samuel reaches his breaking point. His decision to poison his master unleashes a chain of events that explores the depths of human desperation, the complex morality of resistance, and the relentless machinery of slave-era justice. We open not with action, but with silence. The pre-dawn darkness of the Jamaican sugar plantation is broken only by the sound of Samuel's breathing. Describe his world through sensory details: the smell of boiling cane, the feel of calloused hands, the ever-present taste of dust and exhaustion. He is a man who has learned the power of silence. He observes everything: the routines of the white overseers, the vulnerabilities of the master's household, the secret languages of the other slaves. Establish his internal world, a mind that is sharp and observant, trapped in a body deemed to be property. The inciting incident must be personal and devastating. Perhaps Master Thorne, in a fit of rage over a minor infraction, decides to make an example. He doesn't whip Samuel. He whips Samuel's young son, or he announces he has sold Samuel's wife, Sarah, to a neighboring plantation, tearing his family apart forever. This is the breaking point. We see the change in Samuel's eyes. The quiet acceptance is gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. The part ends with Samuel seeking out the one person who might help him, an old blind man named Papa Kofi, who, it's whispered, knows the old African knowledge of plants. Samuel's request is a single quiet sentence: "I need to make the master sick." We delve into the grim apprenticeship with Papa Kofi. It's not just about picking a root. It's a lesson in secrecy, patience, and the terrible cost of this path. Kofi shows him a specific plant, one used in tiny doses for pain but lethal in larger amounts. He warns Samuel of the consequences, not just for his body if caught, but for his soul. Meanwhile, life on the plantation continues its brutal rhythm. We see Samuel's internal struggle as he goes about his duties, now with a secret purpose. Every time he serves Master Thorne, he is studying his habits, looking for the perfect, untraceable moment. The tension builds as Samuel prepares the poison. We feel his fear, his second thoughts, but also his hardened determination. The act itself is swift and silent. He adds the ground powder to the master's after-dinner coffee, a task he's performed 1,000 times. This time his hand is steady. He walks away. The deed is done. The part ends with the sound of Master Thorne coughing and sputtering, calling out that his drink tastes bitter, before his voice is choked off by violent spasms. The scream of the housemaid finding him echoes through the great house. Samuel, in his quarters, hears it and closes his eyes. Chaos erupts. The master is gravely ill, vomiting and racked with pain. The white overseers and the local doctor are summoned. The diagnosis is swift: poisoning. The plantation becomes a pressure cooker of fear and paranoia. The white overseers immediately turn on the household slaves, demanding a confession. Whippings and brutal interrogations begin. They look for a motive, a story, someone to blame. Samuel must now navigate this storm. He acts the part of the frightened, ignorant field hand. He watches as others are punished, his guilt a heavy stone in his stomach. The suspicion begins to circle, perhaps fueled by a jealous rival or observant maid who saw him near the kitchen at an odd hour. The tension is no longer about if he will be caught, but when and how. The part ends with the overseer's hand clamping down on Samuel's shoulder. The doctor wants to talk to everyone who touched the master's food. You come with me. This part is the interrogation and the trial. Samuel is brought before the local magistrate, the plantation owner's associates acting as judge and jury. The evidence is circumstantial but damning. We see the grotesque parody of justice. Samuel is allowed no defense. His testimony is twisted. They find the remnants of the root in his possession, hidden where only Papa Kofi knew. Did the old man betray him? Or was it discovered by accident? Samuel is given a choice: confess and name his accomplices for a swift mercy, or maintain his innocence and face the full, brutal extent of the law, a public hanging. He must make a choice that will define his final moments. Does he protect Papa Kofi and the others? Does he use his final words to condemn the system that created him? The part ends with Samuel standing before the makeshift court, having heard his death sentence. He looks at the faces of his captors and then at the faces of his people in the crowd. He takes a deep breath, ready to speak his last words. The final part deals with the aftermath. Samuel's fate is sealed, but his act is a stone thrown into a pond. We see the ripples. Does he become a whispered legend among the slaves, a symbol of terrifying resistance? Or is his name erased, a warning of what happens to those who defy the system? We pull back from the individual story to the broader context. The British abolitionist movement is gaining momentum in London. Stories like Samuel's, though often suppressed, filtered out and fueled the moral arguments against slavery. The series ends by reflecting on his choice. It was not a grand, successful rebellion. It was a desperate, tragic act. But in a system designed to strip away all agency, it was a final, powerful assertion of his will. The final line could be a voiceover from Samuel's ghost. They could own my body. They could work me to bone. But they could not force me to drink from the cup of my own despair. In the end, it was I who served them the bitter draught. Of course, picking up from where you left off in the courtroom. Samuel stood before the makeshift court, the rough wooden planks digging into his bare feet. The air in the room was thick with the smell of sweat, fear, and the faint cloying sweetness of molasses from the distant mill. He could feel the eyes of the plantation owner, Mr. Wallace, the overseers, and the other enslaved people forced to bear witness, all burning into his skin. The magistrate, a portly man from the nearby town named Justice Higgins, cleared his throat. The scroll containing the death sentence lay open before him. Samuel of the Wallace plantation, Higgins began, his voice devoid of emotion. You have been found guilty of the most heinous crime of poisoning your master, a crime against the very fabric of our society and against God himself. The sentence is, before you speak that sentence into the world, sir. A new voice cut through the heavy silence. It was a young, well-dressed man Samuel had never seen before, rising from a bench at the back. I have evidence that pertains directly to this man's character and this case. A murmur rippled through the room. Mr. Wallace shot to his feet. Who is this interruption? Higgins, this is an outrage. My name is Edward Cooper, sir. I am a solicitor newly arrived from London, and I have in my possession a document. Edward Cooper approached the bench, ignoring the furious glare of Mr. Wallace. He placed a single, well-worn piece of paper before Justice Higgins. What is this? Higgins asked, his brow furrowed. It is a letter, sir, written by Mr. Wallace's own father, the late Arthur Wallace, some 5 years ago. It was meant to be delivered to my firm in London upon his death. The color drained from Mr. Wallace's face. That is a private family matter. It has no bearing. It has every bearing, Cooper said calmly, his voice gaining strength. In this letter, the late Mr. Wallace expresses his deep remorse for the brutal and unchristian practices on this plantation. He specifically names his son, Cooper gestured to the current master, as a man of unchecked cruelty. More importantly, he states his intention to begin the process of manumission for several enslaved individuals, starting with the man known as Samuel for his unfailing loyalty and gentle nature. The room erupted. Samuel felt the world tilt on its axis. The old master? Freeing him? He remembered the elder Wallace as a stern but fair man, often sitting on the veranda, lost in thought. They had rarely spoken, but Samuel had once carved a small wooden bird for the master's ailing wife, a gesture that had seemed to touch him. Lies. The younger Wallace shouted, his face a mask of fury and panic. This is a forgery. A trick by the abolitionists. Justice Higgins studied the letter, his finger tracing the familiar signature. The silence that fell was heavier than before. The evidence was compelling. The old master's handwriting and seal were unmistakable. The trial was no longer about a slave's crime. It had become a trial of the master himself and the very system that gave him power. The magistrate was in an impossible position. To ignore the letter would be to sanction the son's behavior and deny a dying man's wishes. To acknowledge it would upend the social order and admit that the real criminal might be the man who owned the plantation. Justice Higgins looked from the seething Mr. Wallace to the calm, resolute solicitor, and finally to Samuel, who stood with a new, fragile hope flickering in his eyes. The court is adjourned for 1 hour, Higgins announced, his voice tight. I will review this. New evidence. The prisoner will be held under guard. As Samuel was led away, his mind raced. This was not the end. It was a different kind of battle, one fought with paper and words instead of poison. but the outcome would still determine whether he lived or died. 1 hour later, the court reconvened. The atmosphere was electric. Justice Higgins looked weary. "While the provenance and intent of this letter are compelling," he began,